Hello, Bizarre Story friends. If you're tuned in now, you are listening to the Bizarre AF, a place where we talk about the strange, the unusual, the unknown, and all things bizarre AF. I'm Alesha, your host for today's episode, and as always, we ask that you keep an open mind, keep a skeptical ear, but keep on listening to those facts as we take you on our newest journey, Death Delusion. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to say our goodbyes. I had to quote Rent, you know? Hello, Kevin.
Hi, I could have had a little organ music back in the background for you if you wanted.
Here she lies. I love Rent, and we are theater people, so I had to. Right. We're both wearing black. How are you doing? You look very
I'm mourning.
Sharp. Oh, I love those buttons. Those are great.
You see how it goes on an angle? The whole kind of, it's asymmetrical.
Always have the coolest clothes, honestly.
Love clothes.
How are you, Boo?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Yeah, Good. It's been, I haven't seen you in a couple weeks. So it's good to see your face.
A little bit of a hot minute. Yeah. Yeah, it's good to see your face too. So I know I told you, like, Kevin was like, okay, so what is this topic about? We don't really tell each other what our topics are beforehand. And I was like, it's like death, like The Walking Dead.
Yeah, what did you say? You said living death or something.
Yeah,
and I'm like what?
The Living Dead. Yeah, The Living Dead.
Okay.
That could have been a better title for the episode. Oh, well.
I don't know.
I already chose
I'm sure people are like, what the fuck is she going to be talking about?
Yeah, our topic today is incredibly rare, and I'm talking like super duper rare and bizarre. It's just a warning here. I thought I would do it at the top of the episode. We're going to be talking of death, suicide, and suicidal thoughts.
Okay.
So anytime we do have a topic that mentions this, we like to put a disclaimer in. Yeah. If you're having thoughts of suicide, you're not alone. Please call 988 if in the US. And the first link in our show notes will actually be for the International Association for Suicide Prevention. It has resources no matter where you live. You're worth it. So.
Yes. Amen.
Yeah. Business done.
Okay.
I know that we are two dramatic people.
Yeah.
We enjoy stage acting. Mm-hmm. Have you ever played anyone who has died or dies on stage?
Uh-huh.
You have? Uh-huh. Okay, what was it like?
Well, if you ask people who love me, they hated it.
They hated it because you were dying.
I was dying. Even though it was a character and they knew it was a character, they hated watching me die every night.
That would be really hard, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying you were good at it?
I was very good at dying.
Yeah, was it weird? Was it weird to act like you're dead? Were you on the stage for a while?
So I was on the stage every minute of the show.
Okay.
And then I die, but the way it was written is I only have to be dead for about, I don't know, a few minutes. And then I break the fourth wall and talk to the audience.
Oh, okay. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's like the dead person on stage, like the ghost or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, you're alive today.
I am fully,
thank goodness,
fully alive.
I mean, do you feel alive?
I feel very alive.
Okay, good. I don't want to assume anything. You know, right. Sometimes we have worse days. I can tell that you're breathing and you're alive before me, which is great because if you weren't, it would be super awkward. Like
I look alive, right?
Yeah, you do look alive. It would be really awkward to be like Bernie or Weekend at Bernie's, like podcast style. I don't know if that would go over very well.
I think that would not go over well. Yeah. Dead air.
So I actually wanted to tell you, I'm going to tell you some stories about some folks.
Okay.
This one is about a woman who actually woke up one morning and felt off.
She felt off.
Yeah.
As we do.
As we do sometimes. We sometimes feel off. We wake up, maybe we didn't sleep well, whatever. Makes sense.
Right.
Aside from having bipolar disorder, which she had been managing through prescriptions and everything, like for her entire life. This woman was like in her 60s. Everything about her life was normal. She was a homemaker, and she, kind of shrugged this feeling off, for 8 months. But she finally realized that she could not continue
feeling this way.
Yeah, this way. And so she went to a psychiatrist. She was complaining of depression, anxiety, and she did not want to socialize.
Sorry, can I interrupt for a second?
Please
I have
do.
a question. Does she have... Did she live by herself? Do you know?
She was a homemaker. She did not. She had a husband.
She had a husband. Okay.
And I'm assuming at that age, maybe she had a couple of kids in the house, but
Okay.
probably they were all grown.
Okay, and so
at this
she's
point.
just, do you feel like she's just trying to silently deal with her offness?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of questions that can come in, at that point in her life, like potentially empty nester. What's my purpose? These are questions that can definitely come up.
Right.
Right. But there's more. It's more than just that.
Okay. So she goes and
So
sees...
she goes and she's complaining of, I don't even want to socialize. I don't have an appetite. I'm depressed. I have anxiety. She's lost a ton of weight and has, even less interest in keeping up with the house. That's been her job, really, is a homemaker. And so she doesn't even keep up the household. She doesn't want to. She has poor self-care. So she's not, taking showers. She's not brushing her hair. She isn't really changing her clothes.
Sounds like full-on depression.
Super, super depressed. She's not eating. Like I said, she lost her appetite. She has ideas and ideations of worthlessness, a pessimistic view of the future, forgetfulness, and also her motor skills were declining. So her handwriting, just doing fine motor skills, it was really starting to decline.
Weird. And this is all just this. She wakes up one day and this is all starting.
Yes, yeah, and it's it's one thing if you are depressed, and depression can make you feel this way.
Yeah.
But her fine motor skills were off.
Right.
Which is bizarre.
Right.
And she's, as the time's going on, later into the 8 months, she's starting to have these nihilistic delusions, aka she doesn't give a fuck about anything, and she didn't believe in anything, nothing, including the existence of her body parts and the existence of her family members.
Wait, what?
I knew you were gonna say that.
She started believing in the non-existence of her body parts.
Yes, the non-existence of her body parts, and the non-existence of her family members. And I'm not talking about I don't like you.
Yeah, I'm ignoring you.
I'm ignoring you because
you don't exist to me.
Yeah, when you've had one of those fights, or disagreements, maybe with a sibling or a roommate or a significant other, and you're I'm just not going to say anything.
Yeah,
I'm just going to go my own separate way. Just even because we live together, but I'm just going to do my own thing.
Yeah,
I know they're there.
Of course,
right. I'm just pretending like they're not.
Right. Yeah,
it's acting childish.
Yeah, sure.
This is not what we're talking about.
She's full on you don't. I know nothing of you.
You are not here. You in front of me are not here.
Am I asking too many questions if I say, how do we know she's feeling this way?
Because
is she telling somebody?
Yes. So she is vocal about this.
She's vocal about it.
Yeah, and we'll get on as the story goes on and her story goes on, you'll find out a little bit more.
Okay.
So she just straight up did not believe her family was even alive. And in addition,
meanwhile living with them.
Yes, she sees her family.
Yes.
But it's not computing. These people are not alive. They're not even here.
Oh God. Okay.
So we're talking about there's something going on upstairs to make her feel this way.
Full on delusions.
This is not just depression.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So in addition to that, her family's not even, alive. They're not even here. she felt like she was missing these body parts, like different body parts. And she also was believing that she was incredibly poor, like didn't have any money. I don't know where she makes the jump mentally that like these people don't exist. Oh, and I'm poor. It's like, well, you're feeling like you're not really even here.
What the fuck?
Yeah. It's so confusing.
So confusing.
She was even believing that the house that she lived in was going to collapse any day. And everyone, this is where like clearly there's something going on because other people were living in the house. She believed that anyone who was living in the house was going to die because the house was going to collapse. But she also already believed that
there was
they were
nobody
dead.
in the house.
Yeah. Like nobody was even there.
Okay.
So over a period of time, she started to refuse food and she was considering herself already dead. So she thought that she was already dead and she stopped eating.
Okay. Do you think she's just thinking, I'm just done. I'm done. So she stops eating.
It was like, I don't even need food. I don't need food.
Oh, because she thinks she's dead.
Yes, I don't need food to sustain myself.
Because now she believes she's dead.
She thinks
why
that
am I
she's
eating?
dead. Yes.
Holy fuck. Okay.
Yeah. Why am I even eating? Like there's no reason for it.
Well,
because
true.
I'm dead.
You're dead. You don't need to eat.
Yeah. The dead don't need to eat. So
oh my God.
It was getting so bad and her delusions were becoming even worse. She wasn't speaking. She stopped speaking too. She was mute. She was like basically mute.
Okay. Well, she's dead. So.
She's dead. Exactly. She's dead. Refused to eat. And she had rigidity in her limbs. So like her limbs were almost like rigor mortising.
Oh my God.
They're like they wouldn't really move. Remember, she wasn't able, like her motor skills were starting to suffer before. But now we're getting towards the end of that like 8-month time period. And her symptoms are getting worse. And she also was having like incontinence issues. So she wasn't using the restroom. She was, going number 1, number 2. Like it was just happening.
Oh,
and it's like she wasn't recognizing that it was happening.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So her family, after a month of this like extreme behavior, were like, maybe something's wrong here.
No.
Yeah, maybe we should be doing something. It's like, yeah, maybe you should have been doing something like 8 months ago, friends.
You think?
Yeah. Like when she's like I don't know. When I start, okay, a lot of the symptoms at first was like,
a lot of the symptoms at first very much seemed like depression. To me.
Yes, which, bipolar disorder, like there's a lot of depression that ends up happening. And that's kind of a shitty norm, right? That a lot of people could potentially go through. So that's like normal. But like once you start losing your fine motor skills and like, I don't know, I would think, is there a stroke? Is there a brain issue here?
Or you start thinking you don't have an arm?
Yes. Yeah. Like, this isn't mom just being crazy.
Be a little red flag.
Yeah. Like, no, you're dead.
Yeah.
Okay, mom, like, what are you smoking?
Oh,
you're not smoking anything because you believe you're dead. Like, this is a problem.
Yes.
So they finally admit her to a psychiatric facility after a month of like the extreme behaviors.
Oh my God.
So like I would say this probably could have been fixed potentially earlier on if they would have brought her in to a psychiatrist or to a doctor. Let's just say like her limbs are starting to like rigor mortis. Like that's a problem,
Yes, I'm like, speechless. Like why this wasn't being addressed sooner.
Well, people don't listen, right? Like I'm sure because she had bipolar disorder for so many years, there was already a stigma. Like maybe her family's like, she's just being extreme or like dramatic or whatever. Who knows? I don't know. I just know that this is a case of what I'm going to be talking about. So this woman goes into this facility and they have to examine her because she's having rigid, limbs.
Yes.
She's not using the restroom.
Yes.
She's not speaking. She has lost all control of like, any kind of functions in her. And she's also like incredibly malnourished. She's not talking to anyone
eating
at this point, right? So they have to make sure that like everything's okay with her body because it could be like some kind of, something like a stroke or something, right? So nothing about her is normal. She's rigid. She's not even using the restroom, and she's having this physical examination, and they look at her. She's really pale. Well, yeah, of course.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. She's dehydrated. Makes sense. She's not eating. She's having like edema, like pitting edema. So when you push down on someone's skin, that means like there's a lot of fluid retention, and like something is not working. Like their kidneys and stuff are not working well. So when you push into the skin does not bounce back. The imprint of
just kind of remains there.
Yes, remains there. So these are not normal things. When they were like, she was emaciated, like super, super skinny. When they were examining her mentally, she had no affect, was not talking. All of her limbs were rigid, and she was incredibly like negative. So they tested her blood. Her blood wasn't normal because, I don't know, she wasn't eating, right? Had low like vitamin levels and stuff. What I'm trying to say is like she was not in good shape at all at this point. And what they were looking at was, okay, well, you have severe depression because you're bipolar. That must be what's going on. So they started doing like basically electric current therapy to try to shock her into, normality. And it actually started to help. And then they started to give her medications and stuff because, I don't know, she was actually in a place that like gave a shit, and, and she ended up coming out of it. But once they were done, like she came out of like this depression and this weird thought process, she talked to them and she said, I felt like I was like the living dead. I felt like I was walking around and I was actually dead, which is insane. So we find out through this, they diagnose her with a thing called Cotard's syndrome or Cotard's delusion. It's also known as the walking corpse syndrome. And it's a very, very rare mental disorder.
It's all mental?
It's all mental. But as we know, the mental disorders, it can have a physical reaction.
The brains we've talked about before are so powerful.
Yes.
They manifest. They can make physical things happen.
Yes.
Your brain is powerful.
100%. Yeah. And that's basically what we find out with Cotard's syndrome or Cotard's delusion. I kind of like the name of walking corpse syndrome because that's really how these people feel. But it's really a delusional belief, and these people actually believe that they are dead, that they don't exist, that like they're like putrefying, and they don't have any blood in their body. They don't have any internal organs. Like our last lady, she didn't believe that she had any limbs.
I mean, I can't even comprehend this.
I know.
It sounds horrifying.
It is horrifying. Yeah, you just wake up one day and you're like, okay, I'm no longer alive.
What the fuck? Where do you think you are? Like, what do you... Oh my God, so many questions.
Yeah, so...
Okay, so she's still in the hospital. They're getting her to eat, all of this stuff, and she's talking to them now?
She was speaking to them because she's in a psychiatric facility. Okay. So she had the electric current like therapy.
Yes.
And then they also put her on medications. And so between like talk therapy, the ECT, and which is electric current therapy, and the medications that they put her on, and then they started, she had to eat. So like even having nutrients in your body it does make your brain react better.
Function.
Like, function.
It needs food.
It needs food in order to function.
Yeah.
So she's able to talk and say like, this is how I felt. I felt like this is what was going on. And they said, oh my God, you had this like really rare syndrome, the walking corpse syndrome. Yeah. And it's so when people believe, like they're believing that they don't have any blood sometimes, they don't have limbs, they don't have internal organs, they're not actually like alive. Like I kind of think, and this is like where the crazy part in my brain happens. Like if you wake up one day and you're like, okay, I'm feeling really off. Oh, this must be what death is like. I'm dead. Like I could see that you could feel like you are dead and everyone around you, either you're in hell or you're in some kind of purgatory.
Oh, like you're like, oh, I died. And so this is me after death.
Yes. Yeah. This is just what death is like. And then, so you're trying to function and like do the normal things, but like, okay, like, I don't know. We've seen movies about it, right? Like The Sixth Sense.
Yes.
The Sixth Sense, like,
yes, he doesn't know he's dead.
Yeah, he doesn't even know he's dead, but he's still like moving through life as if he's alive. He doesn't realize that he's dead.
Right.
But eventually he does realize, like, oh my gosh, I did die and I've been coming to this kid like all this time, and the kid knows that I'm dead, but I have to realize it myself. This is the exact opposite of that.
Right.
So this is where you feel like you're dead and you're really actually not.
Whoa.
You just feel, but I could understand how if you're in a specific like thought process or mind, like frame of mind where you could get confused about it.
Is this, you said this is really, really rare.
This is incredibly rare. Yeah. It's not even in the DSM, which is the diagnostic. It's the way that you, what is it?
Yeah, it's not
Disorder.
it's not like the Encyclopedia of Disorders.
It's the Encyclopedia of Disorders. Yeah. Of like mental disorders. It's not even in there because it's so rare. It doesn't happen very often. And actually, in 1880, there's a neurologist and psychiatrist, Jules Cotard, which is what this is named after. He actually called this condition the delirium of negation.
Wow.
So, and it's a syndrome that, like every syndrome, has like differing levels of severity, right?
Okay, yeah.
So like a mild case might be like self-loathing, while a more severe case is like Our Lady that we started talking about, where she's just like, I don't even exist. It's like an extreme form of depression. There's a case that he actually had, which is what introduced him to this idea of Cotard's delusion, where they call her Mademoiselle X. She is a woman who denied, once again, the existence of parts of her body and her need to eat. So she thought that she was actually condemned to death and in eternal damnation, which sounds a lot like being in
Purgatory.
Oh my God, I couldn't think of the word. So she was in eternal damnation, purgatory, and she couldn't die a natural death. So she did not experience a natural death like everyone else. She was just kind of the walking dead, like a walking corpse in purgatory. And so once again, decided to not eat. She didn't want to eat anymore. And she actually, this is pretty sad, she did die of starvation because they didn't understand, in the 1800s, like what this was
happening.
And a question, as I was like writing the episode and researching on this, I kept on thinking, how much of this is like a mild form of depression initially, and then it just gets worse and worse. And like a lot of times, one of the most deadly psychiatric disorders is anorexia and bulimia. Because people will kill themselves. It's so deep ingrained into their brain. It's deadly. And so what I wonder is, are these extreme cases of depression that have gone unchecked, And so then people are like, well, I'm so depressed. Why am I going to even eat? The difference with Cotard's delusion is that these people literally believe that they are not alive. Like, someone who has depression is like, oh, I just don't want to wake up today. Yeah. These people don't even believe they went to bed. They don't even believe they went to sleep. Like, they don't even believe that they're alive to wake up. Like it's such a mind bender. So like I said, it's not even in the DSM, which I have it down in my notes here, that it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM. So there are different stages that this disorder has, which is the germination stage. And these are depression, they're of varying degrees. Then we also have the blooming stage, which is where, and this is when something is given enough time, when this like disorder is given enough time to bloom into its fucked upness. The blooming stage is the full development of this actual syndrome, the delusions of them not even existing. And then the chronic stage is where it's these continued severe delusions combined with psychiatric depression, where we met our first lady who was in her 60s, and she was like rigid and lost a bunch of weight and wasn't even talking. So it's like it starts off as depression and then it somehow morphs into this, I'm not alive anymore.
Do we know what triggers it?
We do.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's an area in the brain, which I'll get to. But it's like a form of distorted reality. Right. Yeah. So there's another, like, I love the cases because I just think it's fascinating. These people are like, it's insane to me that these people, believe what they believe.
I think it's fascinating that it's not in the book. Like if we know that this is a thing, and we have documented cases of it, and we definitely defined the degrees of its severity. I can't believe it's not in the book.
I mean, like the book is really like the standard, and these are, if you're looking or talking to a patient or something, you're like, oh, depression. Okay, these are like the main things, the main symptoms. It's almost like a specialist, right? Like, so if you have some kind of form of cancer, let's say, you go to, a general in your state cancer, facility, cancer hospital. Well, if you have a really rare form of cancer, you would go to a
specialist.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. So, which would make sense. This is like incredibly specialized. So I don't know if they have anything like a addendum to the DSM, but this is so rare that it's like it's not worth putting in there in the DSM. And really, is it even worth it in general? Because we don't even use books anymore. So,
fair enough,
you can just probably look it up online.
Okay, the database.
Yeah. Let's go to the database for it. But it's crazy that there are more cases of this than one would think.
How many are there? Do you know?
I don't know the exact number. It's like, we're not talking about like 10% of the population that gets this. Yeah. We're talking about very small.
Point something.
Yes. Yeah. Not even probably not even 1%.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there is literature that does have, but once again, how do you differentiate between depression, extreme depression,
right,
and
or the start
this delusion
of this?
Yeah, because they kind of cross paths.
Yeah, it makes it complicated.
So I'm just going to go into a couple of stories, which one of them is a teenager that had this.
Okay.
And this girl, she actually spent 3 years thinking that she was dead.
3 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
She believed, she was from Alabama, and she believed that she was dead for 3 years. And ultimately, there was something that actually helped her, which was not necessarily medication, although medication was part of it. It was Disney films that made her feel like more alive for some reason. So this disorder does have links to depression and schizophrenia. So people who tend to suffer with extreme bouts of depression as well as schizophrenia tend to be more prone to have these delusions.
Okay.
So it was actually, and normally it's caused by some kind of extreme event in someone's life. So hers was her parents got divorced when she was 14. And she said that one day she was just like sitting in English class and had this really weird feeling that she didn't exist. She was just sitting in the middle of English class and just was like, yeah, I feel like I'm not here. And she actually, like, she had gone home, and later on she had thought about visiting a graveyard because she just wanted to be close to other people who were also dead, because she felt like she was like the odd man out in this world of the living.
Wow.
And it kind of went away a little bit, but then the feelings came back, and she just, once again, like our girl in the beginning, could not shake this feeling. And she said that she actually would fantasize about having like picnics in graveyards. And she spent a lot of time watching horror films because seeing zombies made her feel like she was more relaxed, like she was with like family or like someone who was like her. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my God.
So it was actually 2 years before she finally was like, okay, maybe I should see a psychiatrist for this. And the thing that's questionable about a lot of these cases is like, you know, are these people saying these things to their family members or to their friends? Or are they just like living in this delusion? And in her case, she was living in this delusion and not saying anything to anyone. So,
which is just crazy. Like, I mean, I don't even know what that looks like. Like, what does that look like when you have someone who feels that way, is living in that life with a family who has no clue as to what's happening? Like, what does that even look like?
What does it look like?
It's it's fascinating that it can go so long without being addressed.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. And here's like a question that I was having as I was like reading all these like studies and stories. If you're interacting in your normal life, like let's say I'm feeling, you know, a little depressed or I'm feeling a little anxious or whatever, I would probably talk to my friends or my family about it. If you feel like you're dead,
who is there to talk to?
Yeah, well, why wouldn't you just say something? But you're right. You actually hit the nail on the head. If you feel like you're dead already, who is there to talk to? They're not going to get it anyway. You're dead.
Right.
It's like wasting your time. I didn't even think of that being a reason why you wouldn't come out with like, hey, I kind of feel like I'm dead.
Yeah,
you know?
right. Exactly.
But it's like,
right.
It's like almost like it's not even worth it, I guess, in their thought process. So she went and saw a psychiatrist, and she was very quickly diagnosed with Cotard's, or like the walking corpse syndrome. And she's like, oh my gosh, okay, it's good to know that this is a thing that exists. And she actually says, okay, well, the reason I came back was one, therapy, probably some medication in there too, and watching Disney films.
Again, it's fascinating that she thinks she's dead, but she has the wherewithal to go talk to a therapist about it because she knows there's something wrong. That dichotomy is very weird.
The brain is insane.
It's nuts.
Yeah. Like how can you have both?
Yes.
But you're already not making any sense, right? Like you're already delusional. So like the normal laws and rules that we live within, or like the normal thought processes that we have are non-existent.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I can't understand it. That's why people, I guess, can't really understand mental issues because you can't understand that. You don't experience it.
No. Like there was, I told you about the homemaker. There was also another guy, he's called in this case, in this paper, Mr. B, and he was a 65-year-old like retired teacher. He was pretty well adjusted before this onset of Cotard's disease or syndrome. He didn't have any history of mental illness or family mental illness, which is like kind of sets apart from the other two cases that we talked about. He did smoke cigarettes, and, you know, was addicted to it for like 30 years. But he did start to present with an onset of mental illness once he's quit smoking.
Interesting.
So his mental stability was not, and once again, we talk about there's some kind of trigger typically with these people. That last teen, her parents were divorced. With, I think, the homemaker, our first case, that woman she was a homemaker. She didn't have children in the house anymore. And then you start to question, what is my purpose? Who am I? What am I? That can cause you to become depressed. Like, okay, well, I worked all my life.
That makes sense.
You know?
Yeah.
So he starts being pretty stressed out. And initially his symptoms were like, he was sad, depressed again. And in the early morning, it would be worse. He also wasn't socializing. He had more anxiety. He wasn't sleeping as much, and he didn't really have much of an appetite. Now, sleep and appetite, that's going to fuck your brain up anyway.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So you're making a bad situation worse. Then he increases to ideas of like worthlessness, hopelessness, feeling like he's like sinful, guilty. And as once again, this is like a depression on a larger scale. These people are feeling this way and it's getting worse and worse and worse. We're going through like the different stages of this delusion. So he has, delusions of catastrophe. Everything's like going to end, coming to an end. He was nihilistic. He didn't believe in anything. He didn't believe anything existed. He believed he was really poor, just like the first woman.
That's a weird one.
Yeah, because why would you even like? Why is that a
thing?
Yeah, why does money mean anything? But once again, it's like that depression, like worthlessness, that hopelessness feeling potentially. I don't know. And then he believed that like everything was out to get him. So like feelings of like persecution. He would verbalize that his organs were not working anymore and that his brain stopped functioning. And that his house, once again, this is another house issue. His house developed cracks and was going to fall down. Why does it matter if you're already dead? That's the delusion.
Yeah.
Speaking, right?
Yeah.
So a month before being admitted to a psychiatric facility, he had attempted suicide by hanging himself, but he was saved. So his suicide note actually said that he wanted to kill himself because he feared that he was spreading a deadly infection to people in his town who might suffer from cancer because of it. Right? It's like such a delusion. He also started to believe in these later stages before he tried killing himself. He believed that he was dead and he stopped eating, completely stopped eating. And he lost a ton of weight. So over the next 2 months, he attempted to end his life 2 more times. And after, I don't know, the fucking 3rd time, they finally bring him into an inpatient facility. And when they examined him physically, he had he had hypertension, malnutrition. He wasn't eating. He had obstructive pulmonary disease. Once he's having heart issues because he's not eating and he's stressed out, and probably because he was fucking smoking for 30 plus years. And as far as his mental state was, he had a sad affect. He was very agitated. Ideas of hopelessness, catastrophe, delusion, guilt, nihilism, because he was dead. He felt like he was dead. And he did not have any kind of insight to maybe there's something wrong with my brain, right? They ended up giving him, once again, therapy, ECT treatment, which is the electroconvulsive treatment. They started using muscle relaxation to make his like limbs a little bit more relaxed, started feeding him, and turns out he goes through therapy, ends up feeling fine once he starts dealing with these issues. So, every case, these people are basically believe that they're, they're dead. So they're going to just stop eating. Unfortunately, in Mademoiselle X's case, she ended up dying. This was in the 1880s. So of course they're not going to know very much about it, but it's really a feeling of distorted reality. And there was another contemporary case where there was a guy who was Scottish whose brain was damaged in a motorcycle accident. So he had a motorcycle accident. He had some kind of traumatic brain injury. And he started feeling like this was not reality. He woke up and he didn't believe he was living in reality because he thought he was dead.
Oh, yeah.
So in January of 1990, and he was Scottish, his mother took him to South Africa, and he was convinced that he had been taken to hell instead of South Africa.
Oh, my God.
Because of the heat, because it was so hot there.
Oh, no.
So that's what confirmed it for him and his delusion. And that he had died of sepsis. So he believed that he had died of sepsis, which he had had actually in his recovery of the motorcycle accident. He had a risk of that, and they kept on talking about it. So it was like in his head already that he had died of sepsis back then, or that he had died from AIDS, which he had read a story in the Scotsman in like a journal that someone with AIDS had died of sepsis. AIDS was huge in the 90s and late 80s, right? In the early 90s, late 80s.
Yep.
It was a huge problem. It was in the news everywhere.
Yep.
And so he like borrowed all of these stories and started piecing them together as to why he was dead in hell, right?
Gotcha. Right.
So he thought he had actually borrowed his mother's spirit to show him around hell, and that she was actually safe and asleep in Scotland. So it's like these people are they're living these delusions that make zero sense. But it typically has to do with the brain. There are issues with these people's brains that cause them to have these delusions. We know that like depression is caused by, issues within the brain, right? Like an imbalance.
Right.
But what they find is like neurologically, it's thought to be related to Capgras delusion, which is where people believe that everyone around them has been replaced by imposters. So it's actually the result of a neural misfiring in the fusiform face area of the brain. And that's the area that recognizes faces, and also in the amygdala, which associates emotions to a recognized face. So they think that things are like misfiring, and that's why we're in this weird spot. So this neural disconnection actually creates a sense that the face that they're observing is not a face of a person that it actually belongs to. And so they're unable to recognize that, oh, you're Kevin, or you're alive. Right?
Right. Or maybe that I'm even a person.
Or that you're even a person. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a disconnection between the environment that they're living in and what they're experiencing. So if they see their own face, they might not, like if they're looking in a mirror, they might not associate that that's their face or that it's even a face at all. There is a book by Oliver Sacks called and I might do an episode on this, but it's called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. This man had a neurological issue. Oliver Sacks is a neurologist, and his wife he was unable to recognize. He woke up, had a brain injury. That's typically what happens. And this guy looked and saw, he's like, his wife is not a wife anymore. It's just a hat. He doesn't see his wife as a person anymore. Oh my God. So it's just like these weird neurological like issues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Fucking bizarre. So the Cotard syndrome is usually encountered in people with psychosis or like schizophrenia, but also with depression that we were talking about. It can also happen with folks who have a brain tumor or who have had a traumatic brain injury. And typically the medical literature indicates that this syndrome is associated with also lesions to the parietal lobe. So a person who has Cotard's syndrome or the Walking Dead, whatever syndrome, they present a greater, a higher level of brain atrophy. So their brain is shrinking, especially in the frontal lobe when they do tests. Like there are actual physical areas that are getting smaller. And because of that, or they're just not working, and because of that, they're having these delusions, which is why you would do that electric therapy.
Oh yeah, to stimulate it.
Yeah,
yeah.
Which is insane.
It's crazy, and your brain is ultimately causing this malformation.
Yes, yeah. It's a misfiring. It's either a misfiring, but so oftentimes they do that, the therapy of electric current, and they will put people on different, drugs and medications to try to help the firing of the brain and to stop it from atrophying. So if it's kind of like if a person who has like weak kidneys, you give them like renal, medications, and their kidneys start functioning. Same thing with the brain. So if they're not given if these people are not given therapy in the form of talk therapy, medication, and sometimes electric therapy to stimulate these areas of the brain, they will die. Or sometimes they do kill themselves, whether that's by hanging, like our dude who was a smoker, or if it's through starvation.
Sure.
And it kind of like made me question how many folks who have like anorexia, how many of those people kind of have these delusions because their brain's misfiring, so they just stop eating,
Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't necessarily know the reason. I mean, when we hear the anorexia or bulimia, we think it's because people see themselves differently than. I mean, I guess that it's a form of a misfire, right? When I look in a mirror, I see this big fat fucking cow, when in reality I'm not.
Yes.
So I become bulimic or anorexic or whatever, right? So I guess it's the same.
It's a delusion.
It's a delusion. It is a delusion.
So is it a delusion all the time that someone thinks that they're super fat, or is it that they think that they're dead and there's just like no point to eating?
Right.
I didn't even think of that as being an option.
Yeah.
But that's oftentimes how some of these people will die, aside from like killing themselves, which once again, it kind of puts you into a weird brain loop. You're like, but you already know you're dead, so why are you trying to kill yourself?
Right.
Like
that's why it's difficult for us to understand. Because it's a delusion.
Yeah, it's a delusion. But this is actually like they've had stories. I read a book this year. It was called The Vegetarian. Great book. But the woman one of the main characters in the book has, I think, this delusion. But it's never spelled out in the book. But there are, instances of people in pop culture who have had this. One of them is there's a black metal band called Mayhem and Morbid, and one of the lead vocalist of it was Per Dead Olin, and people think that he had Cotard's syndrome. His name was Per Olin, but he went by Dead, like in quotations. And they believe it was caused by violent bullies as a child. Like these bullies were so bad, they actually left him clinically dead for a short period of time. And he started developing like this obsession with death. And which is why his stage name was Death. And he painted his face, because black metal, they always are so dramatic. But he had corpse paint on his face, and he often on stage would self-harm. And among friends, he just started to become more and more depressed, more introverted, and ended up committing suicide in 1991. There is also, have you ever seen the movie Schenectady, New York?
No.
Okay, so it was Charlie Kaufman. It was in 2008, and there is a character named Caden Cotard, and Caden thinks that he is dying, and so we see other examples of Cotard syndrome in this movie, with scenes with him and his daughter Olive, because she starts to scream, "I don't have any blood in my body," and like it's as the film goes on, Cotard actually disappears from the play that he's writing about his own life in the movie, and he's portrayed by other actors as he takes the role of a cleaning lady. So they're kind of like doing this like weird, like artsy way of explaining and showing Cotard syndrome. So if you ever wanted to see a movie about it, it's that. But
interesting.
Yeah, I thought I would kind of switch it up a little bit and talk about like something strange and very real in our world, because I know that we've had one of the last ones that I did was on aliens. And I felt like maybe I need to be brought back to reality. Yeah. And talk about like these things that can very easily change and within the brain. The brain is astonishing. And you just never know, like through an accident, through somebody, as a child, like beating you up, through your parents getting divorced, stopping smoking, like
exactly.
These like small things they can totally trigger people.
It's fascinating. The brain is just fascinating.
Yeah. And it's important
powerful.
It's so powerful. It's important to, to talk to people. If you're feeling depressed, like we have pills for that. Like you can take care of it, there's no reason to get to that extreme stage of depression where you're thinking that you're literally dead.
Right.
It's like insane.
Right. And the key there though being is that getting yourself out of the delusion may not let you get yourself out of it, which is why it's important as a person without the delusion is to pay attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. The people around, pay attention to the people that you love, right? Mm-hmm. If they're starting to withdraw, like there's probably a problem. And to pay, if you can pay attention, I mean, I don't think that someone who thinks that they don't have limbs like is able to make sense of,
exactly.
Maybe I'm a little depressed, like
exactly.
So it's important for us to watch out for each other as well.
It is. Well, fascinating story.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. I guess again, see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes. And stay alive.
Stay alive. Okay. See ya.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.